All right, because we unfortunately didn't get an episode of Beware the Batman today for some insane reason. I mean, it's only on the seventh episode, but for whatever reason we didn't get it this week. I decided to put up a replacement video, and I'm gonna go over some of my favorite elements of this Batman series as well as every other Batman series, not counting Justice League and Super Friends stuff, just Batman stuff. And I'm going to start off from the very beginning. I'm not going to mention which is my favorite, but obviously you can mention yours. And most people, kind of like myself, would most likely just be the Batman the animated series, because like a lot of the '90s cartoons for anyone, Marvel and DC, it's pretty much the best version aside from I guess the Avengers. Like Earth's Mightiest Heroes, I'd probably consider my favorite compared to the old Avengers show. And I haven't seen like the newest one, but I really loved Earth's Mightiest Heroes, even though unfortunately that got canceled. But oh well. But starting from the very beginning, Adam West Batman. There's not much to say about that. Like I never actually saw the show, but I did see the movie, which is like 2 hours long. It was actually a pretty good movie. I mean, it has some really ridiculous moments, like bat shark repellent, because it's shark repellent, and the fact that everything has bat in the beginning, like bat radar. Like obviously we all have the Batmobile and batarangs. That's fairly simple, but bat shark repellent and the bat phone, the bat radar, the bat well bat cave actually works, but just everything had bat in front of it. Like our bat two-way communicators. I don't think that was the actual thing, but it was something like our bat radios, stuff like that. It's just really silly and campy. But the movie, like I said, I really enjoyed that. It had a ton of different villains in it, and I think it was actually pretty well done. Um, the episodes, the actual show did have Green Hornet and Kato in it, and Kato was played by Bruce Lee, so that's always cool to have just Bruce Lee in anything. It's pretty sweet. So the episodes where they had Green Hornet and Kato come in, it was cool. Crossover episodes, which is something I don't think was really done too much back then, and I don't think any other superhero had a live action show where they did crossover stuff like that. But of course, I'm not really sure. But that was pretty cool. Little stuff like that. Like I said, obviously that show came out way before I was born, but I did enjoy the movie, and the little stuff I've seen with Green Hornet and Kato, and just Adam West being Adam West is he's in like other Batman shows. He's in like in Fairly Odd Parents. They have a joke where he's like Catman because obviously he was Batman, and in Family Guy he is Adam West, and so of course they mention the fact that he played Batman a lot. So it's just Adam West having been that Batman has actually led to like hundreds and hundreds of jokes in television and stuff, and just other references. Like I said, him being in other Batman shows. But it's a random little thing that I kind of enjoy from that show, that kind of just goes through time, and it's kind of for people who are really fans of the show, and fans of the original Batman show, and know that Adam was Batman. So you kind of get the jokes that people play in the Fairly Odd Parents or Family Guy or even the other Batman shows, just when they have him guest star in episodes. Like, oh, Adam West is here because he was he was Bruce Wayne in like the original TV show. But moving on from that, you have what is what I mentioned is probably everyone's favorite Batman. Just Batman, the animated series from the 1990s. Um, One of the coolest elements is definitely the fact that it explores the Batman universe deeply. It has, I'm not sure how many seasons it has, but it goes through so much of Batman. Batman, Robin, Batgirl, pretty much every villain. And it had some amazing movies too. The only one I can really remember is like the Mr. Freeze one, and I know there is a Joker movie, but it's hard to remember what was a movie and what was just an episode. But there is of course the scene where, and this is definitely from one of the movies, it's when I think it's when Joker kidnapped Tim Drake, I believe, and I won't spoil that scene for you, but you can look it up if you want to. But that's definitely a really dramatic scene, from that series, and it was in one of the movies, and they actually had to edit that scene on certain channels because it's actually kind of graphic. It's not really graphic, but you know you can just look it up for yourself. Like I said, I won't actually spoil it for you, but it's a really iconic scene for people that remember it, and if you just happen to look it up, it'll even if you don't remember that movie, it's a pretty big deal just to know that that happened in the show. But it went through for years, and like I said, it has Batman, Robin, Batgirl, pretty much all the villains. That Batman is also like the crossover Batman, really. Kevin Conroy we have, so everyone loves Kevin Conroy as Batman, which is why he's in the Arkham games, because he's kind of Batman for most people. But me mentioning that's like the crossover Batman. He was in some episodes for Superman, and Superman's been in some episodes. Um, that Batman was also in Static Shock, if you remember, for a few episodes. Like Batman and Robin were in Static Shock in one episode, and then I remember, I think it was the second time when Batman was in Static Shock. Robin wasn't with him, and that's actually how they mentioned Teen Titans. It was mentioned in Static Shock before the show actually came out, and he was like, Robin's with the Teen Titans, and Static was like, who is that? And he's like, you'll find out, and then we got, of course, the Amazing Teen Titans. But he that was like the crossover Batman. We got to see him in other shows, and other people came into his show, which was of course really cool. But what I think is probably the best element of that show actually is the fact that it gave us the character Harley Quinn. And for people who didn't know, Harley Quinn wasn't a character in the Batman world until Batman the Animated Series, and I didn't know that until I think Arkham City came out, and I was just looking up some videos and stuff, and I heard that mention, and I was like, I had no idea that she wasn't a character before that, because I wasn't insanely into the comics, and I'm still not, just because it costs a lot of money to be into all the comics. But obviously as a kid, I never would have known that. I just assumed Harley Quinn was just the Joker's girlfriend, but she was made for that show, and she's now obviously an iconic part of the Batman universe, and it would be weird not to have her because of all the things that she's done, games and the TV shows, and it's just weird to think if we didn't have Batman animated series, we might not have Harley Quinn. And it's really cool just to think about that. The show gave us a really iconic character who I don't think anyone really hates Harley Quinn. I think she's an amazing character. Like, she's like ditzy and dangerous, which is a really bad combination. But she's like the girlfriend to the main nemesis, pretty much, of Batman, and that's a pretty important spot to have, and it works perfectly because the Joker is insane and murderous, and she is also murderous, but she's like the lighthearted side of it because she doesn't really want to always just kill people left and right, but she generally does end up killing some people here and there, especially in the Arkham games, because that's of course a grittier take on Batman. So she does, Joker and her both kill people pretty much left and right in that. But she's like the light half of the Joker, even though she's still pretty dark. But I really love that you know new element that it has, and how that kind of lasted, and it's pretty much gonna last throughout time. And she's now a part of just Batman history now. So that's really great. Um, After Batman the Animated Series, the next show, I believe, if I'm going in the right order, was The Batman, which I thought that was a great show. It sucked that that got canceled. It was 3 seasons long, I believe. We did get to see Robin and Batgirl come into play, and I just like that whole show. I thought was actually pretty cool. I thought like the animation style I thought looked really sweet. I thought the acting was well done. It gave a bit more history, and I guess it's just because the animated series had ended years before, because the Batman came out in, I believe, 2005 or 2003 or something like that. And of course, the 1990s Batman, I think that ended in 2000, or probably before that, because I think the animated series show started before I was born, which was in '92, and I think it started in like '90 or '91. So that had gone through its seasons, and I think ended in maybe '98 or '99, and then 5 or 6 years later we get the Batman. So it's the first Batman show in a long time. So for people who did love the animated series, it was like the first, I guess, the first next step for the Batman animation. And I thought it was really well done. Like I said, the acting and the animation just looked cool, and I guess that's just because it was done, after the animated series, so animation had advanced, so it looked cooler. But I think my favorite thing about that whole show was in the second season when they had the new Batmobile, and that's probably like the smallest thing I could have picked, but I just love that Batmobile because it looked so cool to me. And it was just jet black, and it had like the blue line that went through it, and I just thought that was like the coolest Batmobile I've ever seen, and I still think that, honestly. I think it's the coolest Batmobile that's ever been made, and obviously you can argue with me and tell me I'm stupid because it's the internet, but I just thought that looked amazing. Like the original one, I thought looked really cool, and I always loved when he drive it. They'd always have like the cool like light effect behind it when he sort of turn a corner real fast, and it would have like sort of the blurred, like laser line effect to it, and like that looked pretty cool. But then the second one, it just looked amazing to me, and I loved how they actually did that with I can't remember the character, but he basically took over the Batmobile. That was a really cool episode, and it was interesting to see, where they go from there, because the Batmobile in any Batman series is really iconic, and you have that for an entire season, and then it gets destroyed. It's like, oh well, where do you go with the new Batmobile? And I think they did amazingly well with the second one because, as you can obviously tell, I just thought it looked amazing. But some of the characters, my favorite thing about that actually was definitely Clayface. Clayface in the Batman is my favorite. He was like my favorite thing about that entire series because the story they did for it was, in this, and I don't know if this was the actual story for Clayface, and I don't believe it is, but in the Batman, Clayface originally started off just as a normal cop who was actually like Bruce's, like his best friend pretty much in the show, and they like play basketball games and just hang out and stuff all the time. And then, like the Joker comes into play with like his it wasn't the laughing gas, it was some other like toxic gas, and he gets exposed to it, Bruce's friend, and eventually he becomes Clayface because of that, and it messes with his mind. And I always thought, that story is well done, but the character himself, I thought he just looked really cool, like, even as Clayface. Like if you've played the Arkham games, you've seen what Clayface looked like. I was trying not to spoil that, but you see what he looks like, and um, like in this one, he kind of had a a normal look. He was average height. If I mean, he stayed at average height. Obviously, he could have been as big as he wanted, or look like whatever. But when he was just in his clay form, he was just kind of great. I like the animation style for it, and I just thought he looked really cool. It made Clayface seem like a really cool character, in the show. And once again, like I said, the story itself and how they were like actually really close friends in the beginning, and then they kind of became enemies because Clayface just mentally, he was kind of distraught because of what happened to him, and he couldn't really deal with what he'd become. I just really loved that story, and the character himself, he seemed really cool, and he had some episodes where he came back, and I always, that's probably the worst thing about the show being canceled to me, is not having a finality to that arc, because I loved him so much as a character, in the Batman. But I also love how they portray some of the other characters. I thought Joker, played by Kevin Michael Richardson, I believe. I thought he was pretty well done. He had the yellowest teeth in that, but um, I thought he was pretty well done in that show. Like really crazy in that. Like, I mean, Joker's obviously crazy, but I kind of like the look he had. He had like really long, like crazy hair. It was almost like dreads, but not really. He just had like, he actually had like green Dragon Ball Z hair, and it just went back, and it was like Super Saiyan 3 but green. And he was a cool character. And there was actually a movie for the Batman, which was Batman versus Dracula. That was actually a great movie, and I think that's the only one they made. But like, if you haven't seen that, I definitely advise you to check it out. Um, it has Joker and Penguin in it as the villains, and then of course Dracula. And that was just a great movie. That was really sweet, actually. So check that out. It's pretty much the only movie they have for it. But the show itself, I thought, just really well done. And like I said, favorite element for sure, for some insane reason. There's cool Batmobile, and then I put Clayface first, just because it's actually important. So Clayface, and then just the second Batmobile was pretty sweet to me. Unfortunately, like I said, it got canceled, but we did get Robin and Batgirl a little bit. Like Batgirl came in, here and there, and it was actually kind of interesting. Like she came in first, but once Robin came in, like she was kind of just gone. Most of like it was weird how there were so few episodes where all three of them were together. When in like the season before, and obviously it could just natural things can happen where I'm free here but not there. But they could have. I felt like it would have been cooler if they just wrote it in where there were more episodes where all three of them worked together. I thought that would have been better. But anyway, unfortunately, show's gone now. But still has some great elements. Um, One show, Batman: Brave and the Bold. I can't really talk too much about that because I didn't even watch it. Because honestly, it seemed like it was really just for little kids, and that's how it was kind of portrayed, and it was just sort of just silly and over the top. But there were some episodes I saw, some scenes and stuff. Like when they'd have, there was like I remember an episode. There was like a huge fight, and they had like all the different Batmen come in from just like all the different universes. And that was a cool element. Like I said, I didn't really watch the show, so that's all I can really give for that one. But that's just a cool thing to have because we don't really get that, in most shows. Like we got it in Justice League, I believe, where they had multiple versions of Batman and pretty much all the heroes during certain special episodes where they have to do something crazy and over the top. But for the most part, just in Batman alone, we don't really get that. So that leads me to Beware the Batman, obviously the current Batman show. Um, this one, I think the best element is the fact that we aren't getting, top tier villains. We're getting sort of the side villains, and we can kind of get a new admiration for the villains. Like the last episode, I believe was I think the last one was the Metamorpho episode, and I didn't know who that character was, but it seemed really cool. And like I mentioned in my review, like I love the sort of sad love story he had. And before that was the Humpty Dumpty episode, and I didn't know anything about him really, obviously based off of Humpty Dumpty, but they had a really creepy aspect to that character, and it was just really well done to me, and I really love the fact that they're working, with side characters and they're making them important so that fans who aren't, super deep into the comics can learn the entire universe, through these side villains. Kind of like, the animated series did, although it was just so popular, it just went through everything. This one starting off, it's going through, here's the little stuff we're going to give you, all the minor villains to try to show you how cool some of the lesser villains really are. And I really love that about this show. And with it only being 6 episodes, and there's not much else. I do love the acting and Tatsu as a character. Hopefully, her joining Batman soon. That should be pretty cool. And I do love Alfred. Kind of like Hitman. I mentioned he looked like Hitman in like the first episode, and he kind of does sometimes, especially when he had the gun. He looked, it's like Hitman. But I do love the show, and hopefully it'll keep going. So comment below, let me know what you think of the series. Every other series I mentioned, I'm sure I missed something like one Batman show in there, in between or something like that. So if I did, comment below and let me know what you thought of it. But if not, just comment on every show. Favorite Batman show, least favorite Batman show, favorite elements, least favorite elements, things like that. And thanks for watching.